Hello and welcome back to TNWKS, the Now We Know show, the show where we discuss a topic of interest and by the end we will have learnt something new and hopefully you will too. I'm Zak.
And I'm Buzz. And this week we are going to be looking at a very, very complicated subject, but one that I'm pretty sure everybody has sat down and had a conversation about, and that is time travel.
If you enjoy the Now We Know show podcast, support Zak Wylde Productions on Patreon or join our members on YouTube for early access, ad-free content and exclusive episodes. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to this channel and comment below any...
Hang on.
What?
Have we suddenly appeared at the end of the episode?
Oh yes, good heavens!
Surely we should be at the beginning. Did we just time travel?
Possibly.
This is going to get very confusing. Anyway, before we start talking about time travel...
It's time for, you guessed it,
Weird and Wonderful!
So today I have brought in a weird and wonderful story.
Good, I like a weird and wonderful story.
The headline is, Viral video of grandmother caught in shop shutters is immortalised in spray-painted mural.
Ah.
Do you remember this story?
I do. I remember the poor old lady. Mm-hmm. She well, maybe I shouldn't say old lady. I don't know how old she was, but I think you did say she was grandmother.
Okay.
Her
name is Anne Hughes, 71.
Oh, she's 71.
Was seen standing outside the Best One convenience store in Rhondda Cannon Tarf when she was lifted 7 feet into the air after getting caught in a shop shutter.
Yes, I remember that because she was the cleaner.
Yes,
and
she
was waiting there in the morning, and as the shutter went up, it caught her jacket.
Yes, and
she flew.
This security camera footage went completely viral,
Yep.
and now has been immortalised in a spray-painted mural.
Whatever, hanging up.
Yes, so it's going to be there
forever. Oh, bless her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just I remember the shopkeeper suddenly running out and realising she's like dangling 7 feet up in the air.
I know, and it hit the news.
If you haven't seen it, go and find that
It hit
video.
the news big time.
It was very
so
funny, and she was safe. That's the main
The
thing.
graffiti artist was local, and
not
his
another Banksy then.
It's T's 2 Sugars.
T's 2 Sugars.
Yes.
Oh well, there you
with
go.
the number 2,
Oh,
all
right.
one word.
T's 2 Sugars.
Yeah, and there we are.
Is it T's or T?
He's
T
a
and T.
33-year-old from a nearby village.
Ah, there you go. Unlike Banksy, they know him.
I mean, it is quite nice that if you did go to that place, that you'd actually...
You can see the image of a 71-year-old grandmother hanging from a
Well,
coattail.
it would cause you to ask that question, why is that there?
Yeah.
And then the locals would then be able to tell you,
relate the story.
by the way...
Which is quite weird and
Wonderful.
There you go. So anyway, let's move on to this quite in-depth subject, but a fascinating one, because obviously this is the Now We Know show, and we like to learn things.
Yes.
And we learn them in a kind of a layman's way. We are not experts by any means, but we do our research, and we're trying to get things as spot on as we can.
Yep.
And we like to hold a conversation
Discuss.
with ourselves and for our listeners that is kind of the same way you'd have a conversation if you were sitting at the dining table having a chat with family and friends, or you're down the pub with your mates. We've all had those
Or watching a
conversations.
late night talk show on the TV.
Yes, as long as it's not
Late night with the devil.
which we watched the other night. Anyway, that's a completely different subject. But anyway, this week we are talking about time travel.
Time travel, you say?
Time travel, I say, sir. Yes, and in a very Victorian accent, because
Temporal manipulation.
yes, let's start off probably with the most well-known story of time travel, which obviously is a book and then has been made into umpteen
Subsequent
movies
films, yes.
and things, and that's H.G. Wells' The Time Machine.
Yes.
So let's look at that as probably most people's understanding of time travel. So you've got the main character in the Time Machine, who, funnily enough, builds
A time
a
machine.
time machine.
Yes.
And so you see him in his conservatory
In Victorian England.
And he starts to wind it up to go forwards in time, and you get some. I love that original movie because you get some fantastic practical effects, and it's kind of like not stop motion as much as what's the word? Time lapse. That's it.
Okay.
So he's looking out the window, and you can see a flower which grows and blooms and then decays. And you see things like the sun going across the sky and setting, and the moon and the sun and the moon like this. And so you see this kind of gradual progression through time.
Is it just me, or is it the I think it was the remake? Doesn't he get knocked out in some instance, and then goes further forwards in time?
Well, I'm sure that happens. No, I'm sure that happens in the original movie as well. He pushes the lever and then zooms off way into the future. But anyway, so this is what happens. He's travelling through time, and he ends up. I think his first stop is like World War III.
Yeah.
And he finds a descendant, possibly of his best friend. He comes out. He's obviously in his Victorian.
Are we talking about the book or the film?
The film.
Okay.
He comes out in his Victorian gear, and suddenly it's war, and there's everything's going wrong, and he just manages to get back to the time machine in time to. I think he goes back to Victorian times initially, and then nobody will believe him, so he then zips further forward in time. The reason I mention this is because as he goes forward in time, he watches like the house decay around him,
right?
And it gets faster and faster, and then there's like lava covers over his time bubble, if you want to describe it like that, and then turns to stone. And I think he actually breathes out like he's shivering because he's cold, because he's obviously encased in stone at that point. And then that decays and falls apart, and the topography outside changes and all sorts of things. And eventually he stops way into the future, where he meets the nice passive Eloy tribe, who are all nice and kind and good and everything. The survivors, one assumes, from sort of like a post-apocalyptic Earth, but they're being menaced by the Morlocks,
subterranean.
Which are the kind of like you assume
like...
they're subterranean cannibals, which must be kind of like the descendants of all the world's politicians and preppers who hid in their bunkers.
Fair, okay, fair.
So if
that makes sense.
If that's the case, you've got to choose whether you're going to stay outside for the good of humanity, or go in your bunker and become a Morlock.
Depends. Do I have to become a half deranged mutant first?
I don't know. I love that movie, and the Morlocks were just so frightening. I think what was probably most frightening about that film, getting a bit distracted on the film, is the sirens, because they used the kind of air raid sirens to call the Eloy in.
To call the Eloy?
Yeah. As soon as the air raid sirens went off, the Eloy just dropped everything they were doing as if they're going into a trance, and then walked off into the tunnels.
Oh, okay.
And then the doors would shut behind them. And that was it.
Why would the Eloy go into the tunnels?
Because it was like a trance state they were in, from the sound of this.
What, to escape the Morlocks?
Not to escape them. The Morlocks were calling them in as food.
Oh, right, okay.
Anyway, that's completely different. We're talking about time travel. So that's kind of...
That's a big tangent.
Yeah, so that's put us in place. That we've got this chap who's designed this time machine, which basically he goes into the future. But we have a big problem with that, because if you imagine making a time machine which sits like his one on one spot...
Yeah.
Then we initially have a major problem on our hands. Now, let's put it this way.
Because it travels in time, not space.
Yeah, it's more like a lapsing in time.
Okay.
So, for example, if you...
Explain what you mean.
Well, if you go to bed at night,
yeah,
and you're lying in your bed asleep, and you have 8 hours sleep, and you wake up...
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Nothing's happened, but 8 hours has elapsed,
yeah,
but you've been lying in the same place. Now, in this instance, I don't see how that is portrayed in the movie as actual time travel, because time travel, it basically is what it says. You are travelling in time, whereas the time machine is in a static position and is watching time elapse. The reason you've got a big problem with that, in reality, is because here we are in the dungeon studio.
Yes, we are.
Standing on the ground, and the ground we are standing on is currently spinning. The Earth is spinning, and we are spinning around at 1,000 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
Okay? But that's just the rotation of the Earth.
Yeah.
The Earth is orbiting the Sun, and that's orbiting the Sun at just over 67,000 miles an hour.
Jeez.
Okay?
And we're spinning it.
And we're spinning around. But that's not all. Okay?
Okay.
Because our solar system is part of the Milky Way galaxy,
Yeah.
and the whole Milky Way galaxy and all the other galaxies, but the Milky Way galaxy on its own is travelling through the void at, I think it's 1.3 billion miles an hour. Okay? So if you just stopped on the spot and allowed time to go forwards or backwards, everything's going to move. Yeah, and you are then going to be 1.3 plus billion miles in deep space with no spacesuit. Okay, so you can't time travel from a static position.
So you have to move in space as well.
So yes, if you're going to do that, you're going to have to design a time travel machine, like as with the famous TARDIS in Doctor Who,
Or a DeLorean.
Okay, that's interesting because with the DeLorean, it has to get up some speed, 88 miles an hour.
88 miles per hour!
But for every second you either go forwards or backwards in time, you've also got to move with the rest of the universe in that direction.
I see what you mean, yeah.
Otherwise, you are just going to end up with everything else moving on and you being stuck out there, as I say, 1.3 billion miles away from where your start point was. Which is no good for anybody.
No.
Really.
Yeah, maybe that's why we haven't had any time travelers, because they haven't figured that out
They're
yet.
all floating in deep space somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Frozen to death.
Frozen to death. But that's what I mean. So I do see this come up on social media sometimes, people saying, oh, time travel is stupid because you'd be in deep space and blah, blah, blah. Well, as I say, it's not time travel. That's just time static, because you're in a static place and you're allowing time to either flow forwards or backwards, and everything else around you has moved in time. So you, in order to make time travel exactly what it says on the tin, time travel, you need to travel with time.
Okay.
In order to get to the place you want to go to.
Yeah.
So let's discuss: is time travel theoretically possible or not?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. So theoretically, yes, it is possible to travel forwards in time.
Okay.
And I say theoretically possible, and I can give you a kind of an example. A little experiment we can do within the studio.
We do like experiments, don't
experiments. It's a visual experiment, so everybody who's listening can kind of do this at home as well.
Oh, that's cool,
Okay.
interactive.
But I need to kind of describe it first. So if you had... Okay, for me, right, you're standing in front of me.
Yes.
Just put your left hand in front of you, about navel height, that's where your belly button is,
Okay.
with your palm up. And then put your right hand about chin height with your palm down.
Okay. Yep.
And I want you to imagine that you've got a ping pong ball that is now bouncing between your hands. So it's just bouncing, boing, 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 boing between your hands. Right. So that's giving you a description of what I want you to imagine.
Okay.
Now imagine your hands are mirrors, and that ping pong ball is a ball of light, and the mirrors can therefore reflect the light backwards and forwards. Okay. So you've got a ball of light bouncing between those two mirrors at a 1 second interval. So as it moves from one mirror down to the other mirror, it's 1 second, and then it bounces off that mirror back to the other mirror. So it's tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. So this is your visualization of a clock.
I'm a
Ticking at second intervals. Yeah. Okay, you put your hands down now, Zak. You put your hands down. So I want you to imagine that ball of light going up and down. You can observe that 1 second each bounce, tick, tock, tick, tock. Right. Now, with the theory of relativity, E equals mc squared is obviously a discovery made by Albert Einstein. And he also did a lot of other thought experiments as well when it came to time. And time travels, or passes is probably the better way, time passes relative to the person who's observing it, which means that time passes at different rates. Time isn't set at one continuous speed.
Okay.
And this is why I want to try and explain this clock. Okay?
Right. Okay, we're going back to the clock.
If you are standing on a platform of a station,
yeah,
and there is a train parked in the station in front of you, and there's somebody in that train,
yeah,
okay, and you can see through the windows.
Looking through the windows now.
And that person has got that clock sitting next to them, and you can clearly see that clock going tick tock, the ball of light going up and down, up and down.
It's a funky clock.
The person on the platform and the train are both stationary.
Mm-hmm.
So the person observing the person on the train is seeing them in their time. Okay, they're observing that clock ticking away at second time. Okay. However, if you've got the same person with the clock on the train, but the train comes past the station, it comes through the station at say 100 miles an hour,
mm-hmm.
and if you can still see that clock, okay,
mm-hmm.
but the time on the train has started to become slower than the time for the person on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Let me explain why. So I want you to do another experiment now. So I want put your hand out in front of you, to just next to your side. So you
vertically?
Vertically.
Horizontally.
So if you're karate chopping something.
Okay, I'm doing that.
Karate chopping something. And if you bring your hand up and down and up and down, just imagine that's that tick of the clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. Okay? Now that's your static doing that. Tick, tock, right?
Yep.
But now if you imagine going horizontally across your body when you do that. So as you come up and you come down, and you come up and you come down, then move across your body to go back up, yeah, and down, and you're doing that in a continual line. What's happening is when you come down, and as it comes up, it'll go up a diagonal line.
Yeah.
Okay. So you would observe that ball of light instead of going vertically, tick tock, because it's going past at a faster rate.
Mm-hmm.
As the ball comes down, it would look as if it's going at a diagonal angle to hit the mirror at the bottom, because the bottom mirror has moved.
Yeah.
And then bounce off the bottom mirror, and it would go up at a diagonal angle to hit the top mirror, because obviously in the time it takes that 1 second for it to go to the opposite mirror, that mirror has moved. So you're going to observe the light starting to zigzag,
mm-hmm.
yeah, like teeth on a saw, bim, bim, bim. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the faster you go, the longer that zigzag becomes.
Okay.
Do you follow me on this?
Just about.
Right. Okay.
It's quite complex.
So it's not too much. If you're observing that light on the train coming past you, the faster it goes, it will look, the length it takes for that ball to go from the bottom mirror to the top mirror and back down,
mm-hmm.
will look like it's going at a sideways angle.
Yeah.
Instead of just vertically up and down, because you're not static, you're moving.
So are you saying that the person on the train and the person observing the train are experiencing time at different rates?
That's correct. The person on the platform would be observing the person in the train as if their time has slowed down. Okay. Think of that angle, that zigzag.
Yep.
If you call the bottom mirror point B and the top mirror point A,
mm-hmm.
as you zoom past and you get that travelling motion up at an angle and then down at an angle and up at an angle and down at an angle, if you take one A to B measurement and turn it vertically next to the original clock, it's suddenly become elongated. 1 second has become longer for the person on the train from the observation point of the person who is static. The person on the train with the clock next to them would still be seeing it going up and down at 1 second intervals,
because they're moving.
But they're travelling at 100 miles an hour.
Okay.
Because their speed relative to the static, the non-speed of the person on the platform,
mm-hmm.
time is now travelling at a different rate. And that's what it's about, relative speed, because if you were on that train and you threw a ball down the carriage, and you could throw the ball at, say, 30 miles an hour,
mm-hmm.
then as you go through the station, if a person at the station could see that ball being thrown down the carriage, the ball, relative to the person on the station, isn't travelling at 100 miles an hour. It's travelling at 130 miles an hour.
Yeah, because it's being... from the... on the train, it's being thrown at 30, but the train itself is moving at 100.
It's already moving at 100
so therefore,
miles an
it's added an extra.
But
30 miles
inside
an hour.
the train,
yeah,
where you threw the ball, you're only seeing that ball travel at 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, because you're the person.
The time inside your carriage is your time. Yeah. So that ball for you would travel at 30 miles an hour. Outside the train, it's actually relatively speaking, it's travelling 130 miles.
So what you're saying here is the big variable is actually the speed at which
you
or
travel,
the rate at which you travel.
So if you were doing 100 miles an hour in a train,
yeah,
and you overtook another train doing 60 miles an hour, and that person that's sitting on that train looks through the window at you going past, they're only going to see you travelling relative to them at 40 miles an hour.
So is this okay?
So the point with time is the faster you go, for the person observing it from a static position, that zigzag that they would observe will get flatter and longer. It will get longer and longer and flatter until, if you were travelling near the speed of light, it would seem to them that your time has basically virtually stopped.
Right. So is this...
But inside your capsule, it would be ticking away at your normal rate. Tick, tock, tick.
So could this explain the fact that in the previous episode we talked about the simulation theory and people looking at planes, and planes move really, really fast?
They do.
But from the observer, they appear as if they're moving quite slowly.
The further they are away, definitely, yes.
Boom. Connections.
However, in order to really... I mean, you at that speed on the train, saying 100 miles an hour, the difference in time is microscopic.
Yeah, it's just an analogy for the...
As far as
the principle.
Einstein's principle of relativity in time would mean that you would need to travel near to the speed of light. And the speed of light is 670,616,629 miles per hour.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That's fast.
Okay. So travelling at that speed, somebody observing that clock, if they could do, the clock would just zip past, but as if it's not even moving. But if you had a capsule that could travel at that speed, inside the capsule, your time would be just normal time.
Yeah.
Relative to the time outside. Which means, there is, that if you travelled away from the Earth for, say, 24 hours...
At the speed of light.
At the speed of light. So you left and came back within 24 hours at the speed of light. About 70 years would have passed on Earth.
Wow. That's...
Which means, theoretically, if you did that, you'd only be 24 hours older, but you have now, back on Earth, travelled 70 years into the future.
Crikey.
Which means travelling into the future is theoretically possible if you can get to those kind of speeds.
So I don't suppose it's more of a case of elongating one's perception of time. One can't break time to, for instance, I'm gonna go into the past or something.
Well,
you can't go against time.
Well, that's a different,
because you're gonna experience time whatever way you're experiencing.
Well,
it.
Okay, so this is where we kind of have issues, because if we just talk about time travel as you would down the pub, as I say.
Okay.
If you were to say, okay, I'm going to travel 100 years into the future, if it was possible, if the Dungeon Studio suddenly had the powers of Doctor Who's TARDIS, and we could go into the future and travel, so we're not going to end up at 1.3 billion miles away in space, but we could actually travel on the same spot into the future, 100 years, and then 100 years from now, we open the door, we go out, and we look at the news, and we find that somebody called, Albert Johnson has become the the president of America.
Yeah.
And then we travel back to our time, and we say, 100 years from now, Albert Johnson is going to be president of America.
Yeah, but how do you reverse the process to go back in time?
Well, no, let's just say we can do this, okay? The problem with that is that, therefore, if you come back in time and you say, well, actually, I've been to the future, and I've seen what happens, that would suggest, therefore, that future is already set.
In order to get there.
Well, if you went 100 years into the future and found that Albert Johnson was the president of America, and then you came back to now, and then went back into the future to exactly the same point, you would imagine that exactly the same future would still be the same.
Yes.
Okay? So therefore, back here where we're standing right now in our present now,
Yeah.
that would suggest that the future is already set.
Yeah, so in
That
relation to this,
So yeah,
this podcast is going to be edited in the future relative to our present, which is now,
yeah,
and subsequently in the further future is going to be listened to by our listeners, having been edited in the future.
So
in relation to the past, which is now.
Well, we know
the
those.
present.
We know those things are going to happen.
Yeah.
We know those things are going to happen. So you can predict the future to a certain degree. I mean, they did a film, I think it was called Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow, I believe.
I haven't heard of that one.
But the premise of that is kind of like, well, she gets sacked, I believe, oh God, I haven't seen it in years. I think she gets sacked from work and she's really angry and pissed off, to put it bluntly. And she goes to catch a train home. And hence why it's called Sliding Doors, because of the doors on the train. So she gets on the train, goes home, finds, because she's her partner thinks she's going to be at work and she's just been sacked, finds her partner's in bed with another woman.
Right.
They break up. She finds another relationship and actually finds that the whole process means that she actually gets a far better life.
Okay.
But then we go back and we repeat that where she is sacked and she goes to the train, but she doesn't get on the train.
Okay.
And then she gets on a later train. She gets home later, but when she gets home, the woman that he was in bed with, by that time, has left. She doesn't know about it. And so she stays with him and she starts having a relationship where it's getting very kind of, she's very suspicious of him and it's not a very, you know.
Relative
so
to her experience, does she remember the previous?
No, it's kind of a film about what if. You know, you can get into life and it could be as simple as walking through a set of sliding doors. If you do, can your whole life change for better or worse? Or if I don't, can my whole let's make it, which would mean that the future isn't set.
Much like the analogy in Terminator, where it's the future is not set.
Yes,
there is no fate but what you make for yourself.
Exactly. Now, if that's the case, if the future where we are at present isn't set, how can you
travel to
the way people observe time travel, like in the Time Machine, would almost be a case of teleporting yourself into the future, and popping out at a certain point. But if that future isn't set, then there is no future for you to pop out on. From where we are. But if you could travel into the future, like a teleport, that would suggest that all future events have already happened on the timeline, as much as all the past events that we know about behind us have already happened.
So, also,
which means that whatever you do, whatever your choices are in life, you don't have any choice. So, it's going to pan out as it does. But I don't believe that's the case.
A different way is to kind of perceive this. In Primeval, they had anomalies. Where either the past, the future, whatever, is almost happening concurrently with the present, which is respective to us, the person living in the present. And our perspective of time.
There are theories about that,
and
with Primeval,
things cross over into the present of what we would perceive as the present, whereas the present of the things coming through the anomalies are going into the future or the past, respectively.
Well, again, we have that initial issue of the universe keeps moving, so you've got to travel in the same time as the movement of everything. But what I'm saying is about just talking about traveling into the future. I don't think it's possible to kind of have a teleport or a machine that creates a time bubble that is going to send you into a future if that future hasn't happened.
So like so going
for us, we're in the now.
Yeah.
And tomorrow hasn't happened yet.
No.
But if you could go 24 hours into the future and say, observe yourself editing the podcast, because you know that sometime you're going to be editing the podcast.
Hopefully.
Then that's telling you that has and will happen.
And from the future me's perspective, that will be the present, listening to me, who is in the present of this recording, in the past, in the future.
Yeah, but our recordings and time travel. That is just what it is a recording.
So, other thing, what you were just saying about things in the future and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, Terminator 6.
Yeah.
The beginning scene is a Terminator from a future that is proposed to have never happened, appearing in the past and killing John Connor.
Yeah. Well, what I'll say about that is it's a movie. It's a movie, and don't take them as being instruction manuals or documentaries on how time travel works. Okay.
But it's an interesting premise, because how can a Terminator be sent back in time from a future that never happened to kill John Connor?
Well, that's again just a movie, and we can sort of speculate.
Unless you're talking like branching timelines and almost like a multiversal kind of level of things.
Well, okay, so time travel, as I've suggested, theoretically we can travel in time. We would get older ourselves, but
because we're experiencing time
at a different rate. So yes, time travel forwards theoretically is definitely possible if you could get a pod, let's just say, that could carry you at near the speed of light. But you can't do that in reverse. Yeah.
I mean,
you can accelerate, but you're not going to get. But that's going to always take you forwards in time. What we're to now we have the so part one of this about time travel is yes, you can travel forwards in time by slowing your time down. It's called time dilation, by the way, if I hadn't already mentioned that. It's time dilation because you're travelling at a different rate in relative speed to everything around you, okay? But that's not building a time machine. That's building something that can just go very, very fast.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? Problem you've got is going back in time.
So is there like
well, we know that
reverse of the speed of light?
Yeah, no, not really, not that. No, you get. I mean, I'm not going to go into black holes or anything like this, but black holes literally can eat anything: light, planets, matter, and also they warp the fabric of space and can probably mess about with time itself. You know, so going back in time isn't something that you could really even feasibly possibly do. Okay? So, but we know in the past what's happened in the past. But if it was possible to go back in time, you're going to run into other problems. Taking in consideration we found a way to build a time machine that's going to take us back in history, and is going to obviously move with the movement of the universe, so we don't end up out in the space like I've said before. Problem you've got is you wouldn't have to go very far back in human history, and then suddenly nobody would be able to understand what you're saying, and you wouldn't understand them.
No.
And you'd have to take a lot of antibiotics and stuff with you because of the amount of different viruses and things that are around, and God knows what, because you wouldn't last that long if you're not careful. So but if you went back just to Anglo-Saxon times, they wouldn't understand what you're saying, and you wouldn't understand what they're saying. So you can have issues going back in time if you want to. But if you just want to observe, then how are we going to do that?
Maybe it's like the Flash, where you run so fast you activate the speed force, and therefore you can run backwards in time.
Or like Christopher Reeve's Superman, he flew so fast around the Earth it turned the Earth backwards. I think it was a movie again. Or two movies.
Well, they're both DC movies.
Yeah, both DC movies.
It's all about speed, isn't it?
It's all
about speed.
Well, it's speed, but I don't know if it's not.
I don't know if speed can actually be retroactively counteracted in order to reverse time.
No, as far as we know at present, you can accelerate, but not backwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
however,
that's not like just running backwards.
No,
that's not going to work.
Well,
either.
no, because that would just be accelerating technically forwards.
Yeah.
So if you went at the speed of light backwards, you're still going at the speed of light forwards.
Yeah, because
you're just facing the wrong way.
It'd be impressive though
if you could do that. Anyway. So talking about going backwards in time, calculations by physicist Alan Everett show that warp bubbles could be used to create closed time-like curves in general relativity, meaning that the theory predicts that they could be used for backwards time travel. Now, I'm bringing that one up because That's probably about as near as we can get to theoretically travelling backwards in time, is by warping time, space and time itself.
Okay.
So if you had a piece of paper...
Are you going Event Horizon with this?
Well, if you have a piece of paper in front of you and you have say you've travelled, you draw a line on that piece of paper and you put, say, A at one end, B in the middle and C at the other end, and you've travelled down, you've gone through B and you're at C, and you say, well, I want to travel back in time to A, from C. If you fold the piece of paper, you can actually touch C on A
without having to go past B.
Without having to go past B, and then you can if you just stick a pencil through it, make a hole, you can step from C to A and back again because you've warped space.
Yeah.
So you're basically warping the timeline and bringing it into a curve so you can pass at a certain point. You would curve space and time to the points that you would want to interact with. Rather than using acceleration, you need to develop a technology that could warp space.
And
which is like a bit like what they
reality.
do, like what they theoretically kind of do with Star Trek when they, in warp drive, they're warping space in order to go faster than light.
Okay.
Which is not theoretically.
Could it be like jump points in the Marvel universe?
Well, you were mentioned about Primeval.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to jump in at that point, but what you're talking about was exactly kind of that similar thing. You've got, if you like, wormholes that the dinosaurs are
so
coming
like Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Yes, there's kind of we call it probably the best description is a wormhole, but if you want to call it a fracture in time and space, but it's in order to travel backwards, rather than try to think I'm going to travel on a linear line backwards, as you would if you were accelerating near the speed of light. Mm-hmm. Where you can physically go forwards in time, you've got to think about trying to bend the fabric of space-time in order to bring 2 points together. Oof. Yeah. But it's something to think about.
Something to think about, yeah. This is so interesting.
Yeah, it's something to think about. But that's because obviously we know what's happened in the past, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't think that when we talk about the future, that the future is set. Okay,
so we're going with OG Terminator. That what are present decisions decide what happens in the future?
I'd like to think that there really are only two ways of looking at the future, isn't there? Mm-hmm. Either the future isn't set.
Yeah.
So if you decide to the alarm's gone, you've got up in the morning, you've had your breakfast, you put your clothes on, you're going to work, you go to the train station to get on the train, you go to work. Or that morning you decide to get to the train and you go, do you know, sod it, I'm doing this Ferris Bueller and I'm having the day off.
Ooh, that'd be nice.
Is that your choice?
Or is that just predestined?
Or is it going to happen anyway? Because that's the two choices. Either the future is already preset, which means we have absolutely no control because everything that we do, even standing here doing this podcast, is already
predestined.
Yeah, when you were 10 years old,
I was still going to do this.
You were still going to do this right now at this point.
Even though at that time or that present I hadn't decided to do this.
No.
It was always going to be a thing that happened.
It's always going to be a thing that happened, which means that whatever you do in life...
this particular day and this particular time, recording about time in this podcast.
So if that's how time works, that means it doesn't matter what you do in life, it's just going to pan out that way.
So therefore...
I would prefer to assume that it is not fixed.
So therefore, like, personal responsibility and free will is therefore a delusion.
That it would be a delusion. That takes us kind of back to last week's podcast a little bit, but I don't want to focus on that because that was about the simulation theory.
It was another kind of out there concept.
Yeah, but time travel is possible to the future, but I don't see how you're going to get to time travel to the past.
So here's a time travel kind of thing to get your brain thinking.
Mm-hmm. Go.
The grandfather paradox.
Right, okay.
So the grandfather paradox states, for instance, if you went back in time and killed your grandfather, how could you then be born to then go back in time to kill your grandfather?
This is true. It wouldn't.
So therefore, in that sense, you never would have existed to make that decision to go back in time.
Which is exactly the same as what happened in that Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny movie, when they discovered Archimedes' skeleton wearing a watch. from the 1960s, but they hadn't been back to the past at that time for that watch to be there.
So I think another way of describing this is also the bootstrap paradox, in which, another example, Doctor Who, of course, it's in the two-part story, which is called Under the Lake Before the Flood.
Okay.
They're the two episode titles,
Right.
where there's ghosts in the
I think I recall that.
past.
Capaldi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He literally watched that story and he explains this kind of out there concept. And you only kind of scratch the surface of it if you rewatch the story several times.
Obviously you've laid the grandfather paradox on me.
Yeah.
The only way I could see that could possibly work is if your timeline is that you have a grandfather and you have a father and you were born, and then in the future you find a way of time travelling back and you kill your grandfather.
But is that time that you're going back to, is that your past, or is that essentially a new timeline?
No, because you'll be going back.
You're going to then have a splinter off.
No, you're going
into the multiverse.
I would say that if you travelled back and killed your grandfather before your father was born, then I could see where you're saying how they. Well, that would be one of those cases where the timeline existed. You've gone back. You've now changed the timeline.
Yeah.
So you would be stuck in the past.
Yeah.
As a thing from a timeline that never happened. It can only happen once. You can't go circularly round and round and round.
Other instances of this, there was a Futurama. There was a Futurama episode where Fry goes back in time. It goes back to Roswell and essentially becomes his own grandfather.
Right. Okay. Again, it's a cartoon.
Another one, live action this time, Red Dwarf.
Okay.
The classic one of Lister is his own dad.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's just explore.
Based upon an almost preordained sequence of events.
Right. Well, let's since you brought it up, we're having a good old bar room.
We love our movies. We love our TV shows.
How has time travel been depicted within films and TV? We've obviously got the classic Doctor Who, the time machine. Doctor Who obviously says the TARDIS can move through time and space, which is very handy. And then, of course, we've got other. I mean, there was an old 60s one called the Time Tunnel. So now that worked probably off of that whole point of having a wormhole. It was a tunnel that took you to different time.
What about is there another one called Quantum Leap?
Quantum Leap was slightly different.
How was that?
Because I think with that one, and any listeners want to put us right on this, but that was kind of almost he was leaping through time by God doing it. A supreme intelligence, a supreme being was guiding him through time and rectifying people's mistakes.
Oh.
So I don't think that was time travel exactly. That was kind of very spiritual, if you like.
Ooh. What about...
You've had things on Deep Space Nine, Star Trek, that they've done that a few times where they've ended up going backwards in time
or going
into an alternative timeline, which Doctor Who did with Inferno.
It does several times now.
Okay, but yeah, in Deep Space Nine they had the alternative DS9 with Kira being the commandant or whatever and things like that.
Even in classic Star Trek, you had that kind of violent Kirk and Spock.
Yes.
When we had the goatee.
The little goatee and the sleeveless gold top.
Yeah, and the knives.
Yeah, the knives. So time travel...
Austin Powers.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Second and third film. It's kind of like a spiral they jump into.
So time travel...
Groovy, baby!
Time travel has obviously been depicted in many ways.
So many things.
But as far as actually being... a reality, from my investigations, that yes, you can go forwards in time, but it would require moving at a near speed of light acceleration.
So the problem you're saying is, how does one achieve that?
Yeah. The faster you go, the slower your time is relative to that outside your capsule, if you like. So that's achievable, but going backwards in time, unless somebody can develop some way of warping time and space to be able to fold it,
So actually kind of eliminating the need to get it would be this kind of paradox where somebody from the future, having created this something, goes back in time to give it to the now present. So if somebody had a time machine, they gave it to us that we could then use, and subsequently it would kind of go in that loop. And that's that loop I was saying about that paradox, that bootstrap paradox. Who initially created the time machine in order for it to be used?
Well, but I mean, people often say if time travel was achievable, then why haven't people from the future come back to do our time?
Well, you say that,
but that would again go back to that paradox of, therefore, if that was the case, the future is already set.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe there's strict time travel rules.
Well, it's not Loki, is it? Where we've got lots of different time splinters and things.
Or is it?
Oh, I have no idea. It's a head scratcher, and that's why I love these shows we do.
For instance, you've got all these kind of black and white photos with people supposedly holding up phones and things.
Yeah.
In the past, and I mean,
is
that just
Egyptian hieroglyphics showing tanks and planes and submarines?
I think that's that time travel, or is
CGI.
That us?
I think it's AI, especially these days with AI.
Or is that kind of
do me some? I'm talking over you. Sorry about that, but do me some Egyptian hieroglyphics with a tank in it. You know, look what they found in an ancient temple, and then
some ancient astronaut theorists
suggest that
this might be a tank from the future,
or from the past.
I was going back to Doctor Who again. So, in that instance, could this be touching upon this idea of the uncanny valley again, where we look to see?
You see something
like a face,
your
or
brain
a familiar
wants to make
image.
sense of it.
Yeah. So instead of it looks like somebody holding up a phone, but it actually isn't.
Yeah, well, I understand when you have that situation.
Because at that point, they never had phones.
It's like sometimes you get a picture and they say, "Oh, can you see the dog's face in this picture?" And then when you see it, and your brain has recognised it, you can then not stop seeing the picture of the dog's face. It's a bit like looking at a picture of that famous painting, The Scream, where the person's got the hands on their ears. Well, if you look at that closely, it looks like a dog's head with big floppy ears.
I had not considered that.
But once you see it, you can't.
But it's the one that's like, is it a duck or is it a rabbit? It's a picture where it looks like a duck or a rabbit.
It's a person that looks like they're on a bridge screaming.
No, I'm not talking about screaming. I'm talking about another picture.
Oh, is it a duck or a rabbit? Oh, that pencil drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. It's like that. But that's what the uncanny valley is. Your brain is trying to make sense of something, and somebody can see something, and then, because I mean, for example, if there was an actual hieroglyph, if there was a glyph in a temple in Egypt, and it looks like a tank.
Yeah.
And you are a Victorian explorer.
Yeah.
You're not going to see it as a tank, are you?
No.
Because you have never seen a tank.
Because you're only going to see it relative to your time.
Exactly. Whereas if you're familiar with tanks, you can say, that looks like a tank. You know, which would suggest that 100 years from now, they might say, that looks like a shuttlecraft to the moon.
That looks like something we haven't actually developed yet because we don't quite know what it is.
What it is, exactly.
But that's talking from the future's perspective.
Because some ancient astronauts theorists say that it could possibly maybe be, just in case.
It's a primitive form of communication device.
Exactly. No.
I believe in the 20th century they called it a mobile phone.
Yeah. Well, no, you're right, but I think a lot of those pictures are probably doctored a little bit or whatever. It's what you want to see in some of them.
Exactly.
Unless somebody shows me an authentic picture that is 100% fact checked, then I'd just take everything with a
pinch of salt.
Pinch of salt, definitely. So we've
or if you want to see that like hieroglyph in front of your face.
You be able to physically see it and know that its age and where it is real.
Self-authentication almost.
Yeah. But otherwise, I mean, let's face it, in this day and age of the internet and social media, believe very little.
Or the old ancient aliens programs on Blaze.
Yeah, but again, they're just for fun, aren't they? You know. Anyway, but time travel.
Yeah.
Has that helped? Has it helped you understand about how you can have the dilation of time?
E
time
equals
dilation.
MC squared.
Yes.
It is hypothetically possible to travel forwards in time, more difficult to travel backwards in time because it's relative to time being perceived by the individual,
Exactly.
experiencing how they are travelling.
Relative to somebody else's speed.
Yes.
Exactly.
Huzzah. Film and TV, not as...
No.
Very fanciful, but not necessarily verbatim.
If you want to put Jean-Claude Van Damme in a capsule and fire him 100 yards at a wall, and he suddenly disappears and goes into the past or the future.
I know what you're talking about.
Go on. Time Cop.
Oh, I was going to say Time Cop.
There you go. Sorry. Got there first.
No,
But yeah,
maybe you travelled into the future there.
I think the thing is, if you're going to do that with Jean-Claude Van Damme at his current stage of development, it'd just be a rather messy lump stuck to the wall.
You say that in that movie, doesn't somebody else go backwards in time, and then two of the same person occupy the same space in time,
Timeline.
and then they kind of all go a bit weird.
Well, that's they always bring this up when it comes to time travel, don't they? Never meet yourself.
Yeah.
And I can't. What do they call that? They give it a name. But
I can't remember off the top of my head.
but it doesn't happen with Doctor Who, so there you go. He can.
I mean,
he can see as many of
that was the
himself as he
thing
wants.
that kind of created in Doctor Who, Rose met
Paradox is the
a
word.
paradox.
Paradox.
That's a good one. It's a good one. It's a good way of
It's
explaining
the
stuff
word.
away.
You shouldn't meet yourself because it creates a time paradox.
Well, that kind of in Doctor Who, in the episode Father's Day, that when Rose Tyler met herself, prevented her father from dying, which was a essentially predestined thing that was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Having met herself as a kid, like you can't like touch yourself or whatever as a kid.
Sounds a bit kinky.
Stop it. But essentially, that made a
Paradox.
a redacted timeline almost, that these creatures latched onto to kind of end the timeline almost.
Right. Well, that wasn't those batty things.
The Reapers, yes.
Oh, I remember that.
Very good character options figure, that one.
Yeah, that was in the school, wasn't it?
Church.
Church.
It was
okay.
a church.
What was the one in the school? Oh, that was something else with all the computers. That was a Sarah
That was
Jane
with the
one.
Krillitanes.
That's
That
it.
was School Reunion. That was in series 2.
Anyway, let's
David
not
Tennant.
get Doctor Who nutter here. We all have Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, there you go. So that's time travel.
Time travel, folks.
for your layman. Okay, to understand time travel, you need to accelerate.
If you're completely mind-boggled by the end of this episode, listen to it again and again, and
and
maybe eventually you might just get the hang of it.
Yeah, hopefully. And there you go. But anyway, it's time to introduce our new end of show segment.
Wow, exciting.
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, I say it's all new, and it's called Wisdom of the Week. Okay, so this is a new little slot we're putting in.
Ooh.
Every week we'll just finish the show with a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of something that makes you think and hopefully, makes your day better.
Not that this episode already did that.
Did we do it? Maybe we did. I don't know. Time's going weird in here. Anyway, so Wisdom of the Week. Happiness is not about getting what you want. It's about wanting what you've got. There you go.
Wow.
Wisdom of the Week.
That was deep.
Think about it.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to this channel and comment below any suggestions of topics or activities you'd like to listen to in future episodes. Yep. Goodbye from Zak.
And that's a goodbye from past Buzz, future Buzz, and present Buzz. Goodbye.
You can find the Now We Know Show podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. Keep up to date with everything ZWP on Facebook and Instagram, or visit the Zak Wylde Productions website at www.zakwyldeproductions.com. And remember to join us on Patreon or become a YouTube member for early access content and exclusive episodes.